You've been hearing us talk about imperial yeast for a while now, and that's because we absolutely love the stuff. With 200 billion cells in each pitch-right pouch, we rarely need to make starters these days. While originally based out of Portland, Oregon, imperial yeast has expanded to the East Coast, meaning even more people have access to their incredible lineup of yeast, including popular strains like A07 Flagship, A38 Juice, A09 Pub, and a Brewlosophy favorite, L17 Harvest. So good. Whether you brew at home or on the commercial scale, imperial yeast has what you need to make the best beer possible. You can check out all of their available strains and start your planning at imperialyeast.com. When I first learned that I could make my very own beer at home, I was amazed, as it never occurred to me such a thing was possible. I picked up a kit and started brewing like crazy, the first few batches being styles I was aware of from drinking at local bars and such. Then, as I became more invested, I realized there was a whole world of styles out there that I'd never heard of. So I began looking into them and trying as many commercial examples as I could get my hands on, then eventually brewing many of those styles, which only furthered my obsession. Eventually, in an attempt to delve even deeper into the world of brewing and beer and possessing what I felt was enough experience to be decent at it, I decided to start judging beer, which I learned involved a surprisingly rigorous process. You're listening to the Brewlosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and on this episode, I'm joined by contributor Andy Carter to discuss our experiences becoming BJCP beer judges.
Yeah, I'd been learning home brewing. You start in I started with 2009, and then you immediately are like, okay, styles are a thing. There's a kind of a categorized system, and the people that run the beer judge certification program, or the BJCP, offer this test to kind of qualify yourself. I thought that was so interesting because I think prior to that, I just thought of beer as something you drank, and there was obviously quality aspects, and there's beers you like or don't like, but to really critically evaluate and try to put objective numbers rather than just subjective opinion towards certain styles, I thought that was very fascinating, and I was happy to jump in. And honestly, this is going to be a great conversation because I have so much to think about and reveal to myself and review with you, Marshall, about what we think about the whole process of becoming an official judge.
I couldn't agree more. And anyone who's been listening to this show for a while has likely heard me share my opinions on judging and peer evaluation in general. I will definitely be touching on that a bit later. I know you will too, Andy. Though that's not exactly what our focus will be on this episode, so we're going to have to rein ourselves in. I want to give a shout out to patron Haven Schultz for recommending this topic. One of the bonus benefits of being a patron is that we often seek recommendations for this experience series as well as Brews Views topics, which is how we got this one. So thanks a lot, Haven. Speaking of patrons, if you're a fan of this show and you'd like to receive a reward for your support, consider becoming one over at patreon.com/brewlosophy. By making a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. Our guest for this month, October 2022, is Berkeley Yeast co-founder Nick Harris. If you haven't heard of Berkeley Yeast, they are doing some really crazy stuff with our favorite microorganism, including bioengineering yeast strains with the goal of transforming the way we think about fermentation. You can learn more about Berkeley Yeast at berkeleyyeast.com. This is going to be a really fascinating session. If you want to be a part of it, you have to make your pledge at patreon.com/brewlosophy by Friday, October 28th, 2022, as Nick's going to be taking questions that Saturday, the 29th. All past sessions are available on our private Patreon and Facebook pages, so you can go back and watch them whenever you like. Learn more about becoming a patron at patreon.com/brewlosophy. Another really easy way to support us is by using the links found at brewlosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your experience will not change at all, and we get a little kickback for the referral. And if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think about this show by leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts that allow you to leave those ratings and reviews, we really would appreciate it. The more of those we get, the easier it is for people to find the show. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who are known for their incredible all-in-one electric brewing systems. I've brewed on both their 120 and 240 volt systems, and I'm telling you, they are legit, efficient, easy to use with a relatively small footprint. You will not be disappointed with one of these units. Plus, the guys behind the company run a really great YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Clawhammer Supply. If you're in the market for electric brewing gear, make sure to check out what Clawhammer has to offer at clawhammersupply.com. And don't forget to let them know Brewlosophy sent you when you're checking out. That's clawhammersupply.com. Michael Blose had some feedback after listening to episode 252, where we talked about the differences between sodium and potassium metabisulfite. Michael said, I too have been using this in my beers to reduce cold side oxidation. I keyed in on your use of PMB to halt yeast during back sweetening. I believe he's referring to cider there, as I've only been using potassium sorbate as a stabilizer to prevent microbes from reproducing and hence stop them from chewing up all that sweet juice I put into my cider. The price point is very similar to PMB. I do find that sorbate dissolves better in liquid, and I believe there are no sulfites in play here as well. In any case, I thought I'd suggest another tool to use when back sweetening.
Yes, I've heard of sorbates as well. I think it's more common to see that on a package like contains sorbates and food processing rather than sulfites. That's I think more in the alcohol scene, but that's not something I have a great knowledge of. Really, I did look at it because a friend of mine, my friend Jason Thompson, who runs Calusa Brewing in Florida, keyed me in on starting to do more sorbate additions when he was doing fruit and adjuncts in big stouts because they were just going to re-ferment or at least stabilize. So it's another stabilization tool in your tool belt. I think there are differences, like you mentioned, maybe what the actual chemical makeup of it and how it stops things, or process issues like how it dissolves. But it's one thing where it's there's not great stats for the home brewer involved. It is going to be more trial and error. It's like, it works in a certain industry, so you're going to port it over to yours. And like we said, it's so little doing an experiment where you're just trying both and seeing if you can taste it or not, or is it really working the way you want it to. Is good, and it's cool that we're doing that now because I think it's just, again, it's another tool in your tool belt to make the beer you want to make. So go for it.
Yeah, so when I stabilize cider prior to back sweetening, I actually use a blend of sulfite and sorbate, which was a tip I got from Drew Beecham the first time I ever made a batch of cider. I didn't know what to do. I started thinking about the whole back sweetening thing and re-fermentation. So I shot Drew a text and he's like, just do this. And he gave me the exact amounts. And I've never changed that. I've also never really researched why I do it, except for the understanding that both of those together will at least reduce the risk, I think significantly reduce the risk of re-fermentation when after adding sugary substances. Now, I am by no means an expert, but to my understanding, sorbate suppresses yeast and mold reproduction, while sulfites are intended to kill any living microbes that might be present. I'm likely not accurate on that, but that's what I could find in a brief online search. So don't, you can write in and correct us if you like. Now, I've heard that both are equally as effective and that they can be used on their own. And based on anecdotal evidence of using just sulfites, in beer when adding, things like fruit juices and such, I think that's probably accurate, but blending them has worked so well for me, like I said, that I'm just going to keep doing that. So thanks for writing in, Michael. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com or drop us a note on social media. Time for a quick break. When we return, we'll be discussing our experiences becoming BJCP judges. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you. Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the world's fastest counterflow chiller, the exChillerator, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, the Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to exChillerator.com today to see what the Hangover can do for you. If there's one thing I know about brewers, it's that we love to eat just as much as we love to drink. And when I eat, I put hot sauce on pretty much everything. Lately, that hot sauce has come from Atlanta Burns, whose mission is to make uniquely flavored, spicy hot sauces that add a new dimension to your meal. Based out of Atlanta, Georgia, Atlanta Burns uses only the highest quality ingredients to produce handcrafted hot sauces like Jalapeno Business and my personal favorite, Sherman's Ghost. It's so good. Right now, Atlanta Burns is offering listeners of the Brewlosophy podcast an exclusive discount of 10% off their line of killer hot sauces. Just head over to atlburns.com and use code Brewlosophy at checkout. Again, that's atlburns.com and code Brewlosophy to get 10% off your order. Way back in episode 129, Kate and I spent some time sharing our views on beer evaluation and judging. That was a Brews Views episode, which is where we allow ourselves to get a bit more unfiltered and be blowhards about specific topics. This being an experience episode, we're going to be focusing a bit less on our opinions and a little bit more on what our experiences of becoming BJCP judges was like. Now, to get started, perhaps we should clarify that we are both BJCP beer judges. I'm at the certified rank, and Andy, where do you stand?
As certified as well.
So we're both certified BJCP judges. There is kind of a rank order, the way the BJCP does that, which we'll get to. A little bit of history, a little bit of background on my BJCP plight here. In 2014, I took the online exam, which when you pass, you are automatically referred to as a provisional BJCP judge. And then in early 2015, I became a recognized judge after passing the tasting exam. And then through experience judging by 2016 is when I got my certified rank. So that's kind of my background in history. I have maintained that certified rank. I believe next would be national. And then what comes after national, Andy?
Master BJCP judge. And after that, you can actually rise above that to different levels of master. But in general, master is above the first level is service to the BJCP. So it's more of a service award rating than it is a like a knowledge rating or something like that.
So when did you get your provisional rank? And then what was your progression like?
Yeah. So it was early 2014. I think it was like the same time they probably just turned on this pass-fail online exam because the BJCP had trouble staffing this. It's been a common occurrence, and if you enter this world, you'll see how it is an all-volunteer organization, and hey, more power to these people that are running it. It is a lot of work, but you will find it's hard to schedule things because it is all volunteers. So they created this online pass-fail multiple question, multiple choice exam, basically to funnel people into the system to get them started. So that's what I did. I passed on the first try. It's a pass-fail exam. And then I immediately scheduled my tasting exam because, again, those were hard to schedule at the time. So that was 2014. So I became recognized after that tasting exam. And then I scored high enough, because that's how you do it. You have to score high enough in these exams to reach certain ranks. You score high enough that once you've accumulated enough judging points, which we'll get to what those are in a second, I became certified in 2015. So almost the same path as you.
Yeah, it sounds like we're on a very similar path. My certified rank was not, and again, we'll kind of dig into these experiences a bit later, but my certified rank, I was 2 points off after the tasting exam, and I've got some stories as to where I think that came from, to not land the certified rank immediately. So I had just had to get some judging points to get into that rank, which is pretty easy if you've got local competitions who are constantly reaching out to you, asking you to be a judge. So. But that's how it was. So we are both at the certified rank. You having been there for maybe a year longer than I have, probably a little bit less than that, Andy. But we do have quite a bit of experience with the whole process. Now, I do think it's important to point out, in my day job as a psychologist, there are you have to take exams before you can get your license. It's kind of a similar process with this. Back when I took my licensing exam in 2009, I believe it was, the way that it happened, not necessarily the way that the questions and such, but the way that it was that you took the exam is just completely different nowadays. I've been talking to some younger psychologists who are coming and telling me how it works, and I'm like, wow, that's not how it happened back in 2009. Obviously, things change. So if we say some things that are a little bit different, from 8 years ago when we first started our process to becoming judges, that's why we're saying that. Andy, you may have a little bit more modern experience with this than I do, because I have completely kind of stepped away. Again, we'll get into that later, from the whole BJCP judging thing, in part because of Brewlosophy and how busy this thing keeps me. One of the questions, so we reached out to our patrons to ask for ideas, and so Haven Schultz is the one who recommended us talking about becoming BJCP beer judges, our experiences around that. And one of the questions that he said he would be interested to hear us respond to is, why did we decide to become a judge in the first place? So I'm going to go ahead and throw that to you, Andy, and then I'll kind of give my reasonings, which is a little bit weird, but I'll give it to you after you share your experience with that.
Well, I think first and foremost, you look at when I started doing this. So I was brewing in 2009, and then I started the actual testing process in like 13, 14. So I felt that I had enough beer experience and beer appreciation experience to be like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to know more. And I think it was kind of a couple things. One was I saw friends that were BJCP judges. They were accumulating these points during judging, and they were essentially getting some level of seniority at these competitions. So not only did I want to know more about beer and have a solid grounding in these styles, right, that I was learning about, I wanted to be able to go to competitions and have some level of seniority that people know who you are. And you can get that seniority without having to become a registered judge. It's not like it's these are not sort of medical certifications, as Marshall was alluding to, that you need these to participate. But it does show people that, hey, look, this person's committed to working on this. They got a recognized or certified rank. And yeah, I just want to know more. I think there was a period of time, and this is my one time I'll give a little bit of opinion. I did think a lot of this stuff was a little hokey, but I've come around to be like, this is actually quite serious, and it is necessary to actually getting really high quality information out of beer judging. So it was a little thing where it was a little bit of an entry barrier, but once I got started, I was really hooked. So
this is going to be such an interesting conversation, Andy, because I think you and I, like on the general level, kind of agree on a lot of things, but there are definitely places where we depart from our thoughts on what it means to be a beer judge. I'll admit, I mean, if you've heard me talk, over the last 6 years or so since we've been doing this show, you know that I have kind of this weird existential way of viewing most things in life, and that definitely plays a role here. Now, I really hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but I actually never had much interest in becoming a judge. I mean, I really enjoyed like digging into and evaluating beers, especially the ones like I made or my friends made and we brought over, and we're just hanging out, and we'd kind of shoot the ish on what we think is going on in a beer, how much we liked it, and we'd really try to dig into coming up with descriptors that were meaningful to us and not just relying on descriptors that we read online or something. A perfect example is creamed corn for DMS. We might sit there and be like, that I'm tasting this. What could that be? And then we would kind of dig into, oh, maybe that's DMS. Maybe that's how we perceive that. And I always loved that. What really motivated me to become a judge, admittedly, was the peer pressure from that group of friends. I'd become really close friends with these guys. I met them all in the homebrew club at the time. I think four of this group of friends that I was hanging out with, who I still relate with today, I mean, we're still really close, were on the board of our local club. And so we kind of were really serious about making homebrewing this thing in our area here in Fresno, and increasing the quality of the beer that homebrewers were putting out. Well, one way that this group of friends of mine thought that we could do that even more was to become judges. Naturally, right? Because now we're going to be helping out with these competitions and tasting these beers and providing feedback and doing all of this. So anyways, we're spending a ton of time together. They all decided that we were going to, as a group, we were going to become BJCP judges, in part, again, because in our area, that just wasn't a big deal at the time. There weren't many judges. In fact, I think there might have been like 4 total. And so we were trying to more than double that in one fell swoop, as it were. Anyways, about a year earlier, I'd launched Brewlosophy, so that was starting to take up a ton of my time. I kept telling the guys, why don't you do the judge thing? I'll just kind of hang back. You guys can hang out. But they peer pressured me into it. Despite my numerous refusals, they were absolutely incessant in their pestering, and I eventually caved. So it's not the most romantic of stories, but it is what got me into judging in the first place. And I can't necessarily say that it's been a negative thing. We'll get into that in the next segment, but it has been an interesting experience for me, I think, because of this mentality that I had going into it. Obviously, in order to do well on the multiple things that you have to do to become a BJCP judge, it does take some preparation. I'm really curious to hear about your experience, Andy, and what you did to prepare, because I know what I did, and I compare what I did to my friends who prepared as well, and there are quite some differences there. I'm just curious to hear, how did you prepare for the whole process in general?
Yeah. So first, I go in, and you should know that the beer judge certification program is geared to get you to be a good beer judge at homebrew competitions, right? So there's very specific things you're trying to do, which is, if you've not seen it, there's a score sheet you get if you've entered beer competitions, or you can go to the website, you can see there's a score sheet, which is ranking a beer out of 0 to 50 points, how well it matches a specific style guideline, and you fill out aroma, appearance, overall flavor, body of these, the carbonation level, and then overall. So these all have numbers, right? That's the whole point of this. And you're supposed to be able to do it without looking at a book or looking back at the style guidelines. You should have some sense of what each style is, which is a bit of a memorization task, but so that's the goal. So if you don't want to do that specific task, then beer judge certification program really isn't for you. I mean, it'll be good education, but you don't need to take the test. That's what the tests are for. So what I first saw was this online pass-fail exam. The whole book, the pass-fail questions are all available to you. So you can learn what they're going to ask you. And then that's not too bad, right? It's just a time pressure. They put a lot of time pressure on you. You have to answer a question every 30 seconds. So this just gets into, I went to undergrad and grad school. I went to school. I've taken a lot of tests in my life. I'm very good at preparing for taking tests like that, how much time you need. So that was straightforward. The tasting exam, which is closed book, handwritten, you test 5 or 7 beers in a fixed period of time. That I was preparing by bringing my friends over and saying, okay, give me 3 beers, don't tell me anything, and I'm just going to do the sheet and then see how close we get. There's also quite a bit of online stuff on BJCP's website that kind of outlines what you how score sheets should look and not look and stuff like that. So it isn't how should I say it? You're not so blind, because they do offer some good guidance, which once we talk about the written exam, I think we'll have a lot more to talk about in terms of the feedback on the written exam. But suffice it to say, there is good feedback online, or good test material. What I also found was just people talking online. There's BJCP Facebook group.
Yeah.
There's people that have obviously if you're in a relatively even a small metropolitan area, there will be other judges that have higher ranks than you can talk to. The other good one I found was there's actually study groups that the test people were offering, the written exam people were offering, but it was in San Diego. So they're actually preparing you, months in advance, giving you beers, talking about style guidelines, that kind of stuff. Though I did the San Diego test, I do live closer to Los Angeles, and the Maltos Falcons put on these classes every year. So there's, again, if you live in even a relatively, these are big metropolitan areas, but even smaller ones do have some levels of groups, and the BJCP motivates the test people, the proctors, to offer these classes so that the people taking them have the best opportunity. So I didn't necessarily go to those classes. I know people did very well. I'm kind of more of the person that kind of does everything by themselves and maybe brings 1 or 2 people in just because I'm focused intently to make sure we know this all dead to rights. So yeah, 1 or 2 people, but then again, you could have a group of 5 or 6. The best part of it is you're all focused on doing it, and you're all learning from each other. That's what it is. If you're going to add people just to add people, honestly, that's again, I've taken a lot of tests in my life through school.
Yeah, likewise.
You want to minimize. You, in my opinion, you want to have a big enough group that everyone's getting something out of this, and no one is not contributing. That's the main thing. So
yeah. So Andy, when did you start? What year did you and I are about the same age? I believe. I think you might be 2 or 3 years younger than me. When did you get into craft beer? How many years ago did you get into drinking craft beer?
So it was about 08, 09. It was at the end of college. I started I didn't even start drinking until really I was 21, 22. That's not just for the cameras, guys. That's actually true. I didn't really.
You're such a noble man, Andy.
Yeah, and I know I started drinking craft beer, and I'm and that was right when craft beer was actually really getting hot again. I mean, I like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, but I was getting to craft beer.
Yeah,
and then I think that was showing me okay, there's styles. But then to know that there was different style categorization within these, I'm oh, wow, this is really fascinating to me. And that's not commercial beer actually follows style guidelines that much, but it was good. And so then it was probably when I started homebrewing better in 2011, because 08, 09, 010, I was felt okay homebrewing. When I joined Ventura Independent Beer Enthusiasts, that's when I'm okay, I'm getting serious about this. And that's probably, 2011 was probably when I started really looking at BJCP very intently.
Yeah. So I started drinking craft beer in 2002. I was immediately hooked, and I did drink before I was 21. I'll admit that. But it was largely whatever, my colleague at the Best Buy or whatever would buy for me and bring over one of those types of setups. So it was usually Coors Light, Miller Lite, whatever. And when I turned 21, I lived up in Bellingham, Washington, and there was one craft brewery in town, Boundary Bay, which is still in existence. Great place to go hang out, have a meal and some beer. But that I was just so in awe of the flavors that they were making, and it really did. I have this weird thing where when something interests me and I get really curious about how to get this thing, how to do this myself, that I don't have to work to remember things. It just kind of sticks because I'm interested. So when I started brewing a few months later, it was February of 2003 is when I brewed my first batch. I knew that there was IPA. I knew that there was what we back then some of us would call pub ale, which is basically like an English bitter. Everybody had a pub ale on tap, and stuff like that. And I knew that there were those, and then I knew there were lagers that I was going to stay away from because they're hard to make. All this stuff, but you're kind of excited. You brew a couple IPAs, and then again. You're like, I want to try something new. This is fun. I want to try something new. And that's when I discovered this whole world of different styles, regionally based, different strengths, different colors, different flavors, all of this. And I just got interested in enough that I started looking into it. And there was never any intentional, for me, there was never all the way up until, becoming a BJCP beer judge, I never had like an intentional studying moment. And when my friends convinced me to become a judge, I told myself, listen, I just got my PhD. I've gone through the whole taking tests thing. I do not care enough about this to set aside time to do any more of that goddamn studying because it sucked so bad. I'm not going to do it. Now, albeit I was the annoying guy in school who never took notes, who barely had to study because again, I was into something that I was interested in, and so it just kind of stuck. I was never the 4.0 student. I was the guy who could get away with a 3.8, without studying, and that to me was good enough. So I figured with the same thing with the BJCP, all of the testing and all of that stuff. I just thought if I can't pass it, that's a sign to me that I just don't know, I don't have the chops, and that's perfectly okay with me. I'm not going to take it personally. To me, the biggest thing is that experience. From 2003 onward, my investment, my obsession with beer and brewing, I genuinely feel like is what got me through all of this. So that was the crucial component to my success in becoming a judge. And again, out of all of my friends, I've not only been brewing the longest, but I was also the one who'd been drinking beer like that for the longest. A lot of these guys got into it about 10 years later than me. So I had that experience. Now, funny story. I recall we were at a club meeting one time. We did sort of this like beer Jeopardy. It was a lot of fun. I love Jeopardy anyways. And the president at the time, my friend Sean Wood, who's a part of my friend group, was playing host. He selected 3, I believe his aim was to get like some of the most experienced homebrewers as the contestants. There's maybe like 30 people at this club meeting, and he had, one guy who's been brewing since the 80s, and then he had me and some other dude. Again, I was one of them. He mentioned something about making the questions pretty difficult, by asking specific style details, like really, this is going to be tough. I'm going to ask really specific stuff. Well, lo and behold, yours truly won handily, which in addition to surprising the hell out of my friends, made me realize that perhaps I'd taken my obsession maybe a bit too far. I mean, I knew the finest details. In fact, I knew the answer to every question he asked. I felt stupid being the only one answering it, and so I'd kind of keep my hand down. And again, it's not like I studied for this or anything. I was a nerd, and I knew this thing. It's like my son, when he's talking about video games nowadays, he knows these details about, for example, like Call of Duty weapons, where I'm like, how the hell do you know this? Because he loves it. It just sticks, you know, he sees it once and it sticks. So anyway, I blame my success there, as well as on the BJCP exam, largely on that experience drinking and thinking about the various styles that are out there over the years leading up to my exam. I could talk about Belgian wit beer all I want right now. I don't even like that style, but I know about it. I know it goes into making it because I was interested enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing of any type of topic. It's how your brain's working. It's fascinating. I think, just slight jaunt off of to psychology and your how minds work is that as long as you're motivated to learn something, you'll probably become an expert in that. I know there's a lot of things, and I believe it. To become an expert, you need to spend roughly 10,000 hours working on something intently. And I think between either of us, I think we've put in 10,000 hours in homebrewing, between us, or probably both of us, 20,000 hours. So I would say, in the terms of, if you want to box it, not just beer, but home brewing, we've put in those times. So you have that level of expertise. But what it means is that you will take on levels of knowledge that will just be kind of almost easy for you, because if it was much harder, you wouldn't do it, right? Yeah. Because that's kind of the thing, is you need to operate at a level that it makes sense for you to take on those responsibilities and take on the mental load. So
yeah, well, and the way I had a kind of a, I guess somebody I looked up to, if you want to call them that. They weren't really like a mentor of mine or anything, but somebody that I would talk to who's been in the field for a while of psychology. And one of the things that she used to say is that people who have this ability to kind of feel certain ways, that they're not opting to feel a certain way, but it's like ingrained in the fabric of their being, right? It's this thing that they were raised in this environment, and their responses, their reactions to certain stimuli are it's not that they're choosing to do it, it's that it's ingrained in the fabric of who they are, and they don't have to think about it, whether good or bad. And I feel it's kind of the same way with this, with the beer stuff, is like it becomes such a part of your existence that it just kind of gets ingrained. It gets weaved in the fabric of who you are, or that piece of your personality in a weird way. Now, so what I'm saying here is that the biggest portion of my preparing to take the BJCP exams, both the written and the tasting, it was experience. And another way that I got that experience wasn't just through drinking and thinking about beer and all of that. It was through competing. I needed to understand, when you go in to take the exam, you have to understand how the actual judging portion works, how to fill out the form, all of that. And so I'd already been competing for 2 or 3 years at the time we went in to get our BJCP certification. And so I knew how that whole process worked. And I believe at the time we had just transferred to the 2015 guidelines. And so it wasn't a huge departure from the 2008 guidelines. And so it was really easy for me just to kind of make small adaptations. And I understood how to judge. I knew what I didn't like from judging forms that I'd received in the past. I knew what I thought was good and what aligned with what the BJCP expects. And so I just relied on that. I can tell you right now, I know there's study materials. There are groups that you can pay to join. There are online and in-person groups that you can pay to join to help study. I did zero of that. My friends would get together. They would schedule these times to get together, like you said, and do kind of, rounds where they're tasting a beer and describing it to each other and kind of judging it verbally. I never participated in any of that. I didn't want to spend time doing more of what I just spent basically 10 years doing, in school. I just was so disinterested in that. And again, I told myself, if I can't pass this, I'm not going to hold it against myself. I don't care if I'm a judge or not. I'm doing this because I like the community. I like the camaraderie with my buddies. And if I can pass it, then cool. That's great with me. So yes, there are materials, there are methods that you can use, like group studying and all of that stuff, watching videos, listening to podcasts. All of that's going to help you. And I personally think that that's kind of an easy, less overt way of studying is just by absorbing the information that's out there, really kind of digging into beer-related media content that's out there. There's so many websites, so many podcasts, so many different people that you can talk to at club meetings. That's a good way to learn as well. But I know some people have the personalities where they have to sit down, study, pull out their highlighter, and do all that stuff. And if that's what works for you, then that's what you got to do.
Well, that's important, is that we're talking about our experience 10 years ago. We are providing you the content that you need today to learn how to do these tests because we exist as a podcast, right? So it's a little meta in that regard because there wasn't as much 10 years ago. I was just looking back at this and I was saying I was actually fortunate. I took the test when it was 2008 style guidelines because 2015 was the big shift about having about twice as many styles.
Yeah.
And you still have to remember everything. So I was kind of like sneaking in there because I know people that do it now, it's like the number of styles and the amount of you have to memorize is actually a lot more for the tasting exam. But we'll get into the tasting exam in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's move into the online or written exam. There is a, it's kind of weird. I didn't know this when my buddies first started talking about this whole let's become judges thing. I didn't realize you just had to sign up. You do have to pay for it. You sign up and then you have to take like an online exam. I mean, I think I did it from my work computer, 10 years, whatever it was, and it didn't take that long. Now, the idea with that one is just to get a cursory idea of where this person stands, right? You have to pass this exam in order to prove that you have at least some decent knowledge about styles and the way that judging works and all of that stuff. So, I always consulted the BJCP guidelines when I was designing recipes anyways. And that's again, I've talked about this before as well. I'm a neurotic. If I'm going to go and make an English bitter or I'm going to make an American stout or whatever it might be, I went through this phase. And in fact, I'd say I'm still kind of there where I want to make it to style. That's something that I enjoy doing because I want to know if I'm unfamiliar with a style, I want to know if I do this thing as well as I possibly can, what that style really should taste like, right? Now, obviously we play around on the side, but my kind of general approach was always to do that. And that's how I learned so much about these different styles is I was just trying to go through, make different styles, have my friends, hey, check this out. I made a Saison. I made a Belgian Wit. I made this double or whatever. And just kind of get a good grasp of what I could do brewing wise. And through that, I developed this knowledge of what these beers are supposed to taste like, what they're supposed to look like, all of that stuff. So other than brewing and drinking, again, I didn't really do much to prepare for the online online written exam. I've already said it, but I'm going to say it again. I just kind of leaned back on what what I had experienced in the past and hoped I could pass, and told myself that if I didn't, it'd be okay. And so that was kind of my way of preparing for the online exam, which was nothing, I guess. So
yeah. So for me, I looked at the question pool, because again, this is kind of how I prepare for everything. I kind of just absorb all aspects of a topic. I did this, so I'm an electrical engineer, a semiconductor electronics engineer, and when I was younger, I would just read everything, read online papers, read everything. So how I approach is take everything as a fire hose, get a little panicky, and then kind of break it down and bring it back. So with the question pool, you can read everything. A lot of the questions are about beer styles, like would a Belgian Pale Ale have X, Y, or Z color, or does this style have these flavors, or does it have all these flavors? That's the kind of questions that they're going to ask you.
Yeah.
Do it fast. So there's a time component. So if you're a test taker that is stressed about time, I mean, this is a time component, so I would practice. You can do practice exams. The main thing is that rather than just beer knowledge, there are questions about the structure of BJCP a little bit.
Yeah.
So you do need to understand a little bit about how the BJCP operates for those questions, but it's not a lot. Again, and honestly, in my opinion, if you understand what the BJCP is about, those questions are not hard to just guess, basically. So.
Yeah, it comes naturally. I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
And if you grab the BJCP guidelines, which are free online from the BJCP website, you read those first few pages and you'll get what you need to know. And that was my experience, at least.
Yeah.
Most of it you're reading, going, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, cool, yeah, I'll get that right, whatever. So now, what was my experience like during the exam? I think this is probably more the meat of what people are curious about. When I opened the exam and I started taking it, again, I didn't even know there was like a pool of old questions that you could study or anything like that. I just went into it blind, and the first few questions came very easy for me. So I kind of presumed that the BJCP intentionally put some, like, padded the front few questions to make you feel good about yourself, and that they'd get more difficult as I went on. But that just wasn't the case in my experience. They were just like the Jeopardy questions my friend Sean was asking. There were some about the way the BJCP is structured, how it operates, how you're supposed to judge. Again, my experience with competing and talking to other judges kind of helped make that a little bit easier. There were the questions that I really struggled with, and there weren't very many of these on the exam I took. Maybe it's different for you, Andy, were questions about like specific vitals of certain styles and stuff like that. I don't think they put a lot of those on there, because that's kind of difficult. If they're asking like the difference between, an American Pale Ale and a Belgian Pale Ale in terms of finishing gravity or something like that, you can get kind of fudgy on for me. And so those were the ones that I knew I struggled with. But a lot of the questions that were asked in such a way that you kind of knew the base. If you know the basics of the style, you could easily just select the right answer. They are multiple choice. There was one that I remember. They were asking, what style of beer is typically brewed with orange peel and coriander or something. And when the options were something like American Pale Ale, English Mild, Belgian Wit Beer, or Saison, it's pretty simple. If you know anything about certain styles, okay, that's a wit beer. So that for me was how I kind of did it. It was more of a process of elimination when it came to answering the questions, as opposed to hoping to just know the right answer.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that the style stuff is going to come later after you've had some experience. I think they do understand, right, who is the person taking this test. The person taking the online exam is someone that's has some home brewing experience, is interested in judging, has some level of style and knowledge, but they're still new. They are new, right? That's the whole point of taking the test. It's when you get to the written tasting exam, that's when things really ramp up. I think that the requirements ramp up quite a bit. But the online exam is just to get you in the system, so that you can feel good about going to competitions and not be like, am I wasting my time, right? That's the point.
Now, a point, though, for those who are considering becoming a judge is that you can fail the online exam, and you will not pass go if you don't get a certain, I believe it's 70% or something like that.
60 to 70%, like a pass, any type of pass fail in the United States is usually 60 to 70%.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you do have to pass it. So you don't want to just go into it all willy-nilly like I did. But I did, again. I was leaning back on my experience on this, and I was pretty confident in what I knew. I don't want to sound like, it just came so easy. I had over a decade of experience drinking and brewing beer at this point. And so it wasn't, for me, I probably could, if I had taken the BJCP exam 3 years into my brewing career, as it were, I would have had to study. I would have had to do all of that stuff, but it was never something I was personally interested in. I kind of, again, was peer pressured into it and had this experience, and it seemed to work out for me. So now how long did it take you to take the exam? I got this question so many times after I passed it, just from other people. I was already doing brewlosophy. I let people know that I'd passed this exam, and people were emailing me, well, how long did it take? How much time do I need to set aside? Do you recall how long it took you to finish the online exam?
I mean, it's time sensitive. So I think you have to do like a 60 to 90 questions in half that time, so like 30 seconds a question. I think I did it with time to spare, but not much, because I was like, sometimes I'd get stuck on where they want to nail the answer, because I just wanted to have a high score, if I was going to spend extra time. So, you have to, and it could be, I'm misremembering some stuff, it's been a while, but basically you need to be doing about 30 seconds a question, more or less.
Yeah. It took me about 40 minutes to finish the whole exam. And I don't know how common that is, but I remember I did it during my lunch break, one day, and I just knocked it out real quick. And then I think you actually get your results fairly quick after you take it. It's like immediate,
it's scored electronically.
Yeah.
It's going to be pass fail immediate.
Yeah, I was actually going through my emails, and I found the email I received the day that I took the exam saying that I'd passed. So it's kind of nice little validation. Now, again, given my impetus for taking the exam, all of that peer pressure and everything, I don't recall feeling very anxious after taking the exam, which our experience kind of post exam. But I was curious to know if I passed or not. So it was cool to get that email right away, and learning that I did pass. I'd have to admit, it felt pretty damn good. It was validation that I wasn't as big of an idiot. I think going into these things, I didn't realize how obsessed I was with beer styles and brewing and all of that until I took this thing, and I was like, dang, maybe I do know a lot about this thing. It kind of validated this idea that maybe that like I said, I'm not as big of a moron as I thought I was when it comes to styles. So
yeah. So then you take it, you're in the system afterwards, which is great feeling.
Yeah, and it also felt really good that all of my friends passed, so we didn't have to deal with like, this so and so didn't pass, let's help him out, whatever. We all passed, and so we all got to move on to the tasting exam, and that is what we're going to be talking about when we come back from this next break. We finished the online exam. We're going to be getting into our experiences applying this knowledge in real life, as well as taking the tasting exam. We'll be right back. There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD, that's BRUPOD, at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer, and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. There's a certain level of gratification and even excitement that comes with passing the initial online BJCP exam. You get to call yourself a provisional judge, which is kind of cool. And that's totally understandable. It sort of proves you at least know some detailed information about various beer styles. What it doesn't prove is your ability to evaluate those styles from a sensory perspective. For that, there's the tasting portion of the exam, which is done live with a proctor or proctors who are experienced judges, and usually with a group of other people. For me, the tasting portion didn't occur until 5 or 6 months after I'd passed the online exam, as I believe they only schedule them when enough people sign up. We took our online exam kind of towards the end of a year, and so we had all the holidays to contend with. Now, I know for a lot of folks that in-between time is spent sampling various examples of different beer styles in hopes of getting a better grasp of what they're all about, usually in groups where they're together kind of commiserating about these styles. What about you, Andy? How long did you have to wait between passing the online exam and taking the tasting portion, and how did you prepare for it?
Yeah, I was looking online to try to find my answers to the online exam here. So I know I have my date of when I took the written exam, or the written tasting exam was February 1st, 2014 was when I took the exam, and then and that would have been, it would have been months. It was something I had planned very in advance. I can't remember exactly the order of operations. I think I scheduled or got in the queue for the tasting exam way in advance, and then I passed the online exam. I can't remember exactly the dates, but it would have been months apart, right? It was basically because there's so few of them available, and especially when you want to, and then the seating is limited, right? They only maybe let you do like 20 people at a time, something like that. So it would have been months if not a little longer. Yeah,
that's pretty normal from BJCP judges that I've talked to. There's kind of this gap in between passing the online exam and getting into the tasting exam. Now, again, I didn't really do anything special to prepare for the tasting exam. I was too busy with my day job, my children at the time who were far younger than they are now. We just had our youngest, and so she wasn't even a year old at this point, or maybe just about a year old. 3 kids, a day job, brulosophy was kicking at this point. I just did not have time to set aside to go and study and do these tasting things. Now, that said, I would go out and I'd head to the local Bevmo or something and pick up beers that I hadn't tried of certain styles from various regions, and just to drink those and get an idea of what classic examples taste like. If you go to the BJCP guidelines, it's really cool. They list a bunch of classic examples commercial examples that you can go out and buy for yourself to get a good idea of what the BJCP expects those styles to be like, right? So now, prior to the tasting portion, we were informed of who our proctors would be, and I think this may be where I kind of do things maybe a little differently than others. I kind of have I overthink things. And so having known this person who the proctor was going to be, I'd be lying if I said I didn't somewhat kind of tailor the way I was going to approach the tasting exam, knowing who the proctors were going to be, because they're the ones who are basically the way it works, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, is those proctors select these beers and then they go in and they judge them. And then you go in and you judge the same beers, and they just compare their scores and score sheets to yours. And that's kind of where you get, they're obviously looking for certain subjective things as well, but that's the brunt of where the scoring comes from for your how well you do on the exam.
Yeah. And we'll go over it too, so that we're not just saying our experience, because there's a rubric, right, of like any test you take, right, and you can agree with the rubric, you can disagree with the rubric. The rules are the rules. Yeah. That's the game you're going to play. So we're trying to just give you the what our experience was interpreting these rules. So when you have the scoring, the judging exam, again, it's blind judging. The one difference from reality, which is unfortunate, but to keep everyone on the same page, is that you can't look at the style guidelines when you're taking the test. Right. You have to only look at the you can only look at your you only have your memory. You're told what style it is, right, which is important for a reason in a second, and then you have to fill the score sheet out. So the mechanics of it are you sign up, which is usually far in advance. We didn't know anyone. I think maybe we were told when we walked in who it was, and it was just people, relatively famous homebrewers.
Famous homebrewers.
Famous homebrewers. I mean, it was. I mean, to be clear, it's just famous homebrewers, or people that own breweries that were homebrewers back in the day, right? They have some master level BJCP rank. But how it works is there's a proctor, the guy that's the person that's scheduling the exam that you're communicating with. They're going to figure out what beers they're going to pick, and then their master judge, the national or above judges. Typically, that's what you need. I think that there is a minimum. You need to be a national judge to be a examiner or a
proctor. Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
I know it's proctor. There's a term for basically the guys that are tasting the beer also blind. So there's a separate room that you're being compared to. They don't know anything about the beer.
Right.
That's the big thing I was trying to clarify. They don't know anything. They're as blind as you are, except they are the higher ranked judge.
Right.
And you're the lowly, unranked
provisional judge, as it were.
Provisional judge, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so, but what's interesting is only about, they doing this down, and I was trying to find the sheet while we were talking right now. But basically, there are 5 components to the evaluation of the score sheet you fill out, right? So we're all on the same page. You're going to fill a score sheet out, and that's going to get scored by someone else later on, and it'll take time for that score to come out. But only 20% of your score sheet is how close you get to those guys.
Right.
The rest of it is actually how you perceive, which is how you describe stuff. Did you miss the flaws or not? The descriptive ability, are you actually filling out all the lines of a score sheet? There's about 5 to 7 lines to put text on. If you only put 1 or 2 lines, you're going to get dinged a lot. Do you provide constructive feedback? And this is a big thing, and maybe if we want to have takeaways, you don't put assumptions anywhere on this sheet.
Oh boy.
You're tasting beer. If you bring up, I think I taste malt extract, stop doing that. You're going to lose a lot of rubric points when you get your score sheet. I
want to cut in, Andy, and let's put a pin in that, because that is the essence of what you're bringing up there is a big part of why I'm not judging very often these days. And we're gonna cover that at the end. This is not a Brews Views episode, but we're gonna get into a little bit of opinion when we get to the end of this. But yes, what you're saying is absolutely right. I like what you mentioned about there being a rubric, and the BJCP, you could sit Gordon Strong down right here in front of you and say, am I supposed to give suggestions or recommendations? And he'll say, no, that's not judging. That's giving opinion. So when you, at the very least, if you are preparing for your tasting exam, you need to remind yourself that you are not, there's a Dunning-Kruger effect that happens in brewing that we've all witnessed. That is this, cognitive bias where the less experienced you are, the more intelligent you tend to think you are. And as you get more and more knowledgeable about a specific topic, you start to realize just how much you don't actually know. Well, considering the fact that a lot of the people taking the BJCP, and that is by the way, an easily fleshed out kind of rule of psychology these days. We know that it exists, this Dunning-Kruger effect. So it's not a diss on anybody. It happens to all of us. But when you look at the people who are becoming BJCP judges, it's oftentimes folks who have been brewing for a year or two, who are just really obsessed with it like we were, and so there's an element of wanting to be able to provide that feedback that feels good. It feels like you're doing the right thing. That you have to remember when you're going in to take the tasting exam, as you said, Andy, that is not an expectation. In fact, it's kind of poo-pooed. It's frowned upon to do that kind of thing. So
yeah, and then the last 20% of your scoring of the score sheet is your completeness of communication. So good handwriting. Did you actually do grammar, English, those things. So remember, it's not just so I think to calm some nerves if you're thinking about this exam, is that it's not just about how close you get to those proctors in the room. There is more to it. Not to say that's not important. Obviously, you can't do the score sheet if you're going to be so wildly off from them. You would fail in other regards. But just know that too. So just know that ahead of time. It's not just how close you get to those because you're just literally not as experienced.
Exactly.
Period. So.
Exactly. And that's not something to make yourself feel bad about. You're going to gain that experience. It's a part of why there's a ranked system when it comes to being a BJCP judge, right? You're going to start off as a recognized BJCP judge, unless you do so well on the exam that they can bump you up immediately. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the further you are in your score, the actual number, the further you are, the bigger that delta between your score and the judges, the master or nationally ranked judges who are there, then that will ding you differently as well. If you're 1 point off, that's less of a big deal than if you're 6 points off or if you're 10 points off from the judge. So you got to keep these things in mind. Now, so that's kind of our experience leading up to the exam, just things to think about when you're going into taking the BJCP tasting exam. To me, my experience taking the actual exam, this is where I'm going to spend a little bit more time, because I actually quite enjoyed the process. It was not an anxiety-provoking thing to me. It was beer, and I knew pretty much everybody in the room with me, from the other test takers to the proctor to the judges behind the curtain, as it were. And so it was just kind of a fun thing where we all got to hang out, and we had plans to go to a local pub afterwards, and so we made a day of it, and it was a lot of fun. So I wanted to get that out first. This is supposed to be a fun thing. It is still beer, even though you're taking an exam, and I think there was something like 12 of us. We were all spread out so as to reduce the chances of cheating. Don't cheat. Come on. Don't be a jerk like that. We were told we would be judged judging a certain number of beers. I think we did 6 beers on that day, if I recall correctly. And again, it was selected. The beers were selected by the proctor, and the group of, I believe we had a national and a master ranked judge prejudge those beers, and then they actually hung around while we did our thing so that we could talk afterwards, which I thought was really cool. I know that doesn't happen all the time, but being so long ago, I do forget some of the details. But there are a few things that I recall that I want to talk about, because this is an experience episode. So while we're doing the tasting exam, it gets really quiet. All of the test takers were being very respectful. Nobody was looking up, trying to cheat. And the proctor was, a good guy named Tom Pope here locally, a big name in our local brewing scene here in Fresno. He was kind of walking around, just making sure everybody was kind of sticking to their guns and all. Now, one of the beers we judged was an American IPA. But that's all we were told about it, right? They don't tell you where it's from, who brewed it, if it's commercial, if it's homebrew, whatever. Now, when the exam was over, my friends and I, we huddled together immediately to talk about how we scored every beer. And a few agreed that the IPA that we judged, there was only one IPA, was around the 36-point mark. So not a terrible beer, but not the best example. And that it would have scored better, except for this distinct metallic character some of the people detected in it. I absolutely detected this kind of coppery metallic character in this beer, but knowing our local commercial beers that were out there, that keyed into me, oh, it's probably this specific beer, which I know the judges who were judging love. And so I tailored my point thing to that. Again, to me, the whole judging thing, competing and overall is this game that you want to play. It's why when people compete with certain styles of beer, they make embellished versions of it, like caricatures of certain styles, because you want it to stand out. When you're tasting a whole lineup of beer, you want it to stand out. Well, in judging, at least when taking this exam, I approached it the same way. I'm not shy about admitting that. And so I think I gave it something like a 42 point, even though I noted on my exam score sheet, I noted that there was this metallic character, but I ended up nailing what the experienced judges nailed it perfectly, and I think everyone else was like 4 points under, and so they got dinged a little bit for that. But again, the beer was familiar enough to me that I was able to kind of guess what it was, and so that helped me in that respect. And I don't think you want to get the best points. You want to get the best score on this exam as possible, because it gets you closer to upping your rank. And so if you have to tailor your approach, knowing who the proctor and who the judges are and what you might possibly be drinking, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Another example, we had judged this Belgian double, which we later learned after the fact was brewed by another local homebrewer who was not taking the exam. Well, a few of my friends who were taking it with me, part of this group of friends of mine, had taken a trip to Belgium the year prior and came back with this, first off, an absolute love for Belgian beer, in part because they realized that in Belgium, the beers aren't these bubblegum bombs. They don't have this massive amount of banana or clove or bubblegum flavor. So this double we were judging tasted just like a piece of Bazooka Joe. I mean, it was a bubblegum bomb. So we all docked it for that. And I did as well, because I had been convinced that, oh, these judges, they're so experienced. They know that truly good Belgian beer doesn't have that. So they're probably trying to throw us for one here, right? That was my mindset. Unfortunately, the judges thought this beer was excellent. So they scored it a lot higher than we did. And none of them commented on I don't want to use off flavor, that's too strong of a word, but commented on that bubblegum flavor as being a bit off. And so we all got dinged for that as well. And in fact, I mentioned earlier, this is the beer that made it so that I didn't automatically get the certified rank after the tasting exam, because I scored it so much lower than the experienced judges did. So kind of interesting experiences.
Yeah. So I just, with the power of the internet, I found my old evaluation. So I did did the exam, and I was going to remind myself how they did it. And honestly, it does behoove you. You can take this exam anywhere, of course, but I do like taking them in areas where there's more people taking it, because then the proctors are putting a lot more effort into it. You can also take this exam usually at HomebrewCon or things like that, so you can kind of plan ahead. But the nice thing about doing it in like a big area like where I'm at with, I think Quaff members were running this one, was that they really put a lot of thought and effort into the beers you're testing, because what they did was it was 6 beers. Usually they're going to give you 1 or 2 beers which are either have known off flavors, like they'll have a strong off flavor component, or they're going to give you a beer that's absolutely not to style. So they'll say, judge this as X, when clearly the beer is Y, and that's to show you, you must judge this poorly because it's not going to meet the style guidelines.
Exactly.
So what I remember specifically was there was beers that I'm like, wow, this has really got some other odd flavors in it. And I was like, something's wrong. And I would just write that up. So basically the big thing of judging and taking this test is just, you have to know your style guidelines, of course, but don't freak out when it's like, oh man, this beer tastes bad. It's supposed to. Don't try to shy away from that. I remember one was like, it was way too bitter. It had weird green stuff. And then I was like, oh, it was like supposed to be a Pilsner, but I'm getting like an American hop. And it turns out, yeah, there was like, he boiled with the lid on, put grain in the thing, all these things that you make the beer bad, he did, and then he used like Cascade hops. so there's kind of things like he did things like that. And I remember that, and like Marshall mentioned, the master or the high rank judges stuck around and actually went through their sheets themselves. Like they pulled their sheets out and be like, this is exactly what I said. Yep. And it was lining up very much with the proctor, right? So of course the master judges are going to get this really well. So, and I've found my the scoring of my score sheet. So once we're that section, we can talk a little more about it, because it's very interesting to look back and say, oh man, how did I really, was I doing well or not? And it's cool to look at that. So, but yeah, no, the exam itself, like Marshall said, take it with a grain of salt. It's for fun. It is, I think the nerve-wracking part to me was not so much how I did, because of course it's the first time I'm doing it, I'm new, is that I didn't want to score so poorly that I have to take this again soon, right? I didn't want to do so bad that it's like another year of not having it. Then again, I feel very differently now about it than I did back then. All I was thinking about for a large portions of my homebrewing was this exam, right? So you have that recency bias. When you look at it that way, looking back, I'm like, oh, well, who cares if I took it another year or whatever? I would have gained judging points, which is all that really matters for rank. So, anyways.
Well, on that note, of my group of friends, this was where a couple people didn't quite make the cut, right? It is the tasting portion of it is difficult. Like you mentioned, I didn't even have this in my notes, but yeah, they're going to throw curveballs at you. That's kind of the point, and catching those can be difficult. And you're sitting there judging these 6 beers or whatever it is, trying to figure out, is this the one they're trying to screw me over on? Is this a bad beer? We had the same thing. I think the BJCP must encourage proctors to do this. We had a beer that was completely out of style, right? But they don't, it's not like they're saying, here, judge this American pale ale and serving you a Russian imperial stout. It'll be like, here's a pale ale, and it might be something like a blonde ale with Cascade hops or something.
Exactly.
And so they're close enough to where it's like, well, crap, am I getting this right? I am judging it as a pale ale. So you're not guessing the style, which good luck on anybody who thinks that they can accurately guess styles consistently. What you're doing is you're saying, as a pale ale, does this fit? Does this hit all the marks? And so you have to be vigilant of, where does this kind of diverge a little bit from what I know a pale ale is supposed to be, or whatever the style is. So I think that's one of those things that during the exam is constantly just going over in your head. Now, again, for me, I was already convinced, if I don't make the cut, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to pay for it. I don't really care that much. I got lucky. I was happened to get a pretty good score, actually. If it weren't for that damn Belgian beer, I would have probably been a certified right off the bat. And then our experience after taking the exam, we've already talked about it. We got to hang out with the judges and the proctors and talk about, compare notes. All of us, I think all but like 2 of the people who took the exam went out to a local brewery right afterwards and kind of commiserated over our experience taking the exam. To me, again, it was a lot of fun. You're building this community. And all of those people, even though I've got kind of a set of closer friends that I still communicate mostly with, all of those people I consider friends of mine, and we still maintain contact. And I think most are still involved in brewing. And in fact, 2 of them are the ones who organize all of the local competitions, it seems now. So yeah, that's another cool thing about becoming a judge, is that it puts you in a position where you can organize competitions that are BJCP certified, or part of that. So kind of cool. So you said real quick, we're going to get into putting all of this into practice. And I think this is where we're going to get a bit more opinionated. It should be fun, but you mentioned wanting to share some of your score sheet stuff. I'm curious to hear how you did that. Yeah.
So, again, I think I'm going back and there's notes. I wrote down notes back then about the beers that were given to us. So I don't have what the proctor gave us specifically. I just have my memory, but we gave us 6 beers, and it's really nice. I mean, it does take a long time to get this. I took the exam in February. I received this exam rubric grading in like June or July. It took about, it takes 4 or 5 months, and it could take longer. But it does say, it kind of breaks down exactly the score sheet, and it says overall performance. And like I said, you're judged on 5 different things: perceptive accuracy, descriptive ability, feedback, completeness, and scoring. On average, I was certified. I was certified for the first 4, and I was actually nationally ranked for scoring accuracy. So how close I was getting to the master proctors. And I'm going through this, like, you identified this, you identified this. So what's really nice is take this exam, take it seriously. Don't stress too much about it, because the feedback is going to be really solid to what you need to work on.
Yeah.
That's what I have been working on. I was not perceiving beers nearly as accurately as I should have been, and that is me, right? That's on me to know my blind spots, know what's strong and know what's weak, and then know how to describe it. That's really descriptive. What was interesting was everyone's worried about getting close to the master judges. I was scoring them nearly as well as anyone else, if not better, which was really funny. I was getting close to their numbers while I was messing up other parts of the score sheet. So, just take this feedback what it is. And it's cool because you get to see that. And the other part of it was they do send you back your score sheets.
Yeah.
So you can see what you wrote. And then look at the rubric grading and then make an evaluation. So it's good, and it's cool. I can see here my handwriting is absolutely no better than it is today. So perfect.
Well, congratulations, Andy. You're consistent, to say the least. Well, that's a really good segue into talking about what kind of sharing our experiences since becoming BJCP judges. Again, episode 129. If you want to hear our deeper opinions and kind of unabashed way of sharing those opinions, go back and listen to that episode. We get a bit more into it. But one of the things Haven asked was what was it like after becoming a judge? What is your perspective of judging in general? All of that. So we're going to get into that. One thing you mentioned is how these master judges who prejudge the beers and then you're comparing your score sheets with them. That's how it has to work. There is this presumption that judging approach is purely objective. There are some aspects of it that are objective. Most of it, in my opinion, and people will argue with me to their death, is subjective. And that's the piece. I wouldn't say that I'm quite to the point of being disillusioned about it, but my conviction in the subjectivity of judging beers is what has driven a wedge between me and wanting to be a part of the judging scene, because it seems like most people just are wholly convinced that it's mostly objective. The reality is this, and the reason I say that is this: if I'm tasting a beer, and, that morning I had a certain type of breakfast, maybe put some Tabasco sauce on my eggs or something like that. And I come in and maybe my allergies were kind of kicking in a little bit, but hey, it's just regular seasonal allergies and all of this. And I sit down, maybe I got into an argument with my kid about something, and all of that is going. We know for a fact, all of that stuff will play into the way you perceive things that you are ingesting. That's just the way we work as humans. And so there's no place for that when it comes to judging. And so to sit down and take a beer, if you've ever judged with a judging partner, the way I like to do it is let's judge these separately first. And as the certified ranked judge, oftentimes when I was judging, I would be the most experienced, and there'd be some either provisional or even not even provisional judge there. But because I'm there, they can still judge these beers. Usually what would happen is we would judge them completely independently. Then we'd come together and talk about our judges, and you can make changes and such. The BJCP actually encourages that, to kind of get closer together or whatever. There were times I'd see these other judges, and I'm sitting there saying either I'm completely off on this or this person is completely off on this. And that's happened with me sitting with higher ranked judges. And so that in and of itself, to me, it sends this kind of message that like there is a subjective component here. What if I don't have the ability? What if my sensitivity to diacetyl is lower or higher than the person I'm judging with? It's stuff like that. And I wish we could just acknowledge that subjective component, but people don't want to. The BJCP doesn't really want to. And I'm okay with that. It's just, it makes it way less interesting to me. To me, competing is supposed to be fun. It's not to be used as some sort of proof of your prowess, of brewing prowess. Now, obviously it gets spun that way, and that's fine, whatever. Be proud of winning a competition. But the approach to doing it, I remember my first few experiences judging competitions and sitting there. First off, I'd be lying if I didn't say that when I first got my certified rank, which again was about 6-7 months after I got my recognized judge rank, it felt good. And when I went into judge, there was an air of kind of confidence that I had, but checking myself on that and realizing don't let that get in the way of you actually judging these beers properly and not doing or making the mistakes that so many judges make on score sheets. Like, try not to do that. You know, some of the worst feedback I've ever received is when people presume parts of my process that I did, you know, oh, you didn't boil long enough because I'm getting creamed corn. I'm like, all right, you listen to podcasts, you heard somebody refer to DMS as cream corn, and you think you're picking it up there. Do you think I believe that it's actually there? I've come to realize that usually that's not the case. And our experiments, honestly, have kind of bolstered that belief that I just don't think most people, I shouldn't say most. I personally don't believe a lot of people are detecting or perceiving what it is they're writing down. They want to be the one to call it out. There's something that feels good about that. And I noticed that too often for me to feel comfortable going into these judging situations. So that has been my experience. What about you, Andy?
You know, I think taking the exam made me, and then getting that feedback, I do strive on like hearing the feedback. Am I going the right direction, doing a good job? And then it shows you that, right? Certified judging, and then really it's not so much that I think you'll do your best score sheets when testing, and then you'll try to be as diligent when you do the real exam. But you're going to find people that are just not going to take it. You know, your level of seriousness is not going to match. I agree that it is a subjective process, but we're trying to make the most subjective thing taste and your opinion, to trying to give it some balance, some rigor, right?
Yeah.
And I would say the BJCP is struggling to do that too. I think you're right. I think they should acknowledge the subjectivity more. They do allow for points to try to, you try to get your scores within 10 points of each other, or something, some 8 points. It's quite a large range, right? Yeah. But you should, the main thing is understanding who you're working with, your local community, and don't be too bashful of saying, I don't want to judge these styles. I know I'm not good at judging these styles, or I don't appreciate these styles. I'm going to give them worse scores just, subconsciously. Who you judge with, who you hang out with, you make it fun, right? Don't do it because you get into it and you're like, oh man, I don't like judging with this club. I don't like the people I'm hanging out with. Do it for you. In the end, you're doing it for yourself, right? I do it for myself to increase my ability to perceive, to see different examples of how beer is brewed, take that sense memory back to my home brewing, and then get something out of it, right? Improve my own home brewing.
Yeah.
I also want the other person to have good feedback, but you'll be surprised how many people, don't really, they may be doing competitions, look at the other side of it, flip it around. You're judging it for you to get better at tasting and understanding and perceiving beer. They could be entering for feedback. I enter competitions to donate money to the club, right? That's my giving back to the club, right? I don't really care the feedback. Let's see. Some people are chasing medals, right?
Yeah.
They're just looking for a number. That what you write is not so important to them. They already know this quality of their beer. So, just measure everything, but do it because you want to do it. Don't do it because of some other reason, right? Get what you get out of it. And if you're not getting what you want, then don't. I think doing the BJCP was important to hone my craft, and it does offer you this. It offers you seniority. I was not going to sit at the bigger tables, the best of show tables without some rank. And I will say, Marshall and I have not taken the written exam. We are not national judges. The next step on this path is to take a written exam, which I have really. I thought about taking. My friends have taken, and I have a few friends that are nationally ranked. I don't have the. For now in my life, I'm not really interested in sitting down for a written exam right now.
Same.
It's if you and we didn't really get into what we think about the rubric and those kind of things. I think that there is subjectivity in how these things are judged, how these things are evaluated, and I look at the rubric, I look at what they want for the written exam, and I'm just not ready for that one right now. I think it's very, if you're good at test taking, it's very simple, right? You just they tell you this, they tell you everything ahead of time. Pretty much everything in the BJCP is open to you prior to taking it. You just don't know what question they're going to ask.
Yeah.
So be ready for it. Rewrite. But they are taking a pretty serious approach. If you're in the United States and you've taken SATs or ACTs where there's a written component, you know that there's a rubric to how they grade those things. Yeah. If you don't follow the rubric, you're going to falter. So, be a smart test taker if you're going to take this much forward. And then, hey, you can say you're a nationally ranked judge, master judge. Hey, then you can come back and contribute more. And that's really, like I said earlier about master, that's you giving service back to the BJCP in the terms of being a steward for the association, for the certification program. And so if your aspirations are just to judge beer, honestly, certified and national are where you want to be. You'll never be turned away for judging. You're like, hey, oh, we don't need your high skill level here. Okay.
Yeah.
You'll be able to actually take on a lot more responsibility at your local homebrew competitions if you want. And then past that, you're really just looking at service awards. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. You mentioned something that I want to hit on, this idea of submitting into competition for feedback on your brewing. That used to be so commonly touted, right? If you want to know how you're really doing, submit to a competition. I am of the very, very ardent belief that you are going to get more quality feedback from sharing that beer with local friends that you trust and sitting down and talking about it. Friends who aren't just going to, butter your buns because they don't want to hurt your feelings. There is especially today, if you saw some of the most recent, for example, NHC score sheets, there is no room for feedback. It's literally a score with some check marks. So the thing is, competing costs a lot of money. It is not cheap these days. Not only are you paying to enter, you're paying to ship, bottle, ship, all that stuff. So as a judge, I would not suggest taking what I put on your score sheet as some, holy form of feedback. It really is me trying to be as unbiased as possible, which we know is impossible, but trying to be as unbiased as I possibly can in grading this beer as I understand the style to be. There are very few experts on every single style of beer. As you have experienced, I'm certain, Andy, when you go into judging and you show up and the proctor or whoever's organizing that competition says, all right, you're going to get, American Amber Ale, you're going to get British. They're not asking you what your expertise is in. They're assuming that you have a decent enough understanding of every beer style that you can do a decent job judging those beers. And that's what I mean by subjective. And oftentimes, this has happened many times with me, again, with more experienced and less experienced judges who I'm judging with. You'll sit down at a table and you've got your flight in front of you and you go and you smell it and you're looking at the other person like, where are we on this? Because perception is subjective. I get it. We can all call grass, but the way we feel that grass, or even that on that level, you don't know for sure that it's 100% shared experience. And that's the same when it comes to judging. So that's kind of, again, I mentioned it earlier that I'd talk about where I'm at. I just don't judge anymore. I feel like because I don't necessarily jibe with the way judges are these days, and I actually don't think it's the BJCP's fault. I feel like the wider kind of gestalt of thinking, the collective belief about the way judging is supposed to go, it just doesn't fit with my perspective. And so out of respect, I've kind of pulled away from that. And it's a part of the reason why I enjoy the way we do our beer reviews on this show. It's not very serious. It is very subjective. We honor that piece of it. But we do try to talk about, how well maybe it fits to the style as well. And I'll mention things that I think. To me, if you are going to be a BJCP beer judge, the one area where I will probably look down on you is if you start giving people recommendations on their score sheets. That is an absolute no-no. Oh, you should probably boil this longer because I perceived DMS, or you fermented this with the wrong type of yeast. You don't know what these people did to brew those beers. So don't put that. You don't need to put that. You can just comment on what you thought you perceived. And again, be subjective about it. Recognize that is what you are perceiving, and maybe it's not what everybody else is perceiving. That to me is very important. So those are kind of my wrapping up thoughts. Do you have anything else, Andy, before we put a bow on this one?
Yeah. I would say, don't fret the level of rigor that it appears to have. I would say do what you want to do. I would say it's helpful. I think it shows your commitment to doing it. And if you don't like it, then you don't have to do it. Like if you get your time into it, you pick it out. I do it to get and give back to the community. I've done that kind of more that role these days in terms of community support and management. So I judge to help the communities out, help these clubs out. And I get experience. I like tasting the beer. I do. Hey, you know what? I don't like filling those score sheets out. If you're 8 beers in and you're on your last score sheet, you're like, oh, I just want to leave. I just want to get out of here. Yeah, you're going to get tired. You're going to get sick of it. But you're still. I use it as a learning tool, right? So that's what I do. And my schedule's getting busier these days, so I'm not judging nearly as much as I want to. We're both getting older. Sitting around all day, drinking until 1:00 in the afternoon. Your day is lagging at that point, right?
Yeah.
It's work, right? You have to commit your time, and so that's another component of this too. So take the tests. I think it's worthwhile, but you might find that when you're done with it all, that it isn't really for you.
Yeah. Your perspective might change, and that's okay. It's not the most expensive thing to get involved with. Don't beat yourself up if you don't pass any of the exams, whether the online one, tasting, or if you're going for national rank. It is just beer. But to me, I guess my final kind of statement on this is that the brewing community is what I love about this whole thing. And I am not dissing the BJCP. I'm not dissing judging. I'm admitting that it doesn't jibe with me. And so I'm the one who made the choice to kind of opt out of it, even though I still maintain my certified rank. Will I judge future competitions if it lines up with my schedule? Like you said, I've got 3 kids, a regular job. I do all of this brewlosophy stuff. Usually I have to tap out. I wasn't able to judge our local fair competition because of that. In fact, I was out of town. So it's not that I'm wholly against it. It's just, I think people need to go into it with the right mindset, knowing what to expect when they get there. But all in all, you are a part of a community that I do think it makes it very worthwhile. And you are going to have friends that you make in the judging scene that will be your friends forever, for as long as you're in brewing at the very least. And for me, that makes it very, very much worth it. So, well, don't forget to check out our other podcast, The Brew Lab, where host Cade Job takes you into the lab with brewing experts to discuss the fascinating research they're doing on our favorite beverage. And remember to head over to brewlosophy.com to stay current on everything we're up to. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it soothes my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.